SPQR, 4 letters that still get tattooed on modern soldiers' skin, 2,000 years after the empire fell. But here's the question no one dares to ask. What if SPQR was never about the people at all? What if it was a psychological weapon engineered to enslave minds while pretending to set them free? Rome didn't conquer the world with just swords. It conquered it with symbols etched into temples, banners, and bodies. And across the entire history of the Roman Empire, no symbol was more powerful than 4 simple letters, SPQR. And SPQR, it wasn't a noble banner of Republican pride. It was the lie that made tyranny feel sacred. So why do today's soldiers still wear it? What phantom are they really honoring? Welcome to Shadows of Ancient History. Today we're cracking open one of history's most seductive illusions. And once you see the truth behind these 4 letters, you'll never look at Rome or yourself the same way again. SPQR, Senatus Populusque, Romanus, the Senate and people of Rome. At first glance, it sounds noble, a statement of shared governance, a republic in harmony. But as the republic stretched its limbs across continents, SPQR became less a declaration of unity and more a branding iron. When Roman troops entered new lands, Gaul, Judea, Egypt, those 4 letters were etched into stone gates and victory arches. They weren't messages of peace, they were warnings, declarations. Rome is here, and so are its gods. The phrase began appearing in places the average Roman citizen would never see. Outposts, temples, borders carved by conquest. Curiously, even after emperors seized absolute control, SPQR remained. Why? Because the illusion was useful. Historians still debate whether Augustus, the man who turned a republic into an empire, kept the letters out of reverence or strategy. Most lean toward the latter. By preserving SPQR, Augustus didn't just maintain power, he sanctified it. Every decree bore the mark of the Senate and people, even though neither truly ruled anymore. Consider this. The Roman Senate continued to convene during Nero's reign, even as Rome burned. Its presence on parchment gave legitimacy to madness. SPQR was now a puppet-stringed chorus. Yet it worked. For centuries, Romans believed in the system, even when emperors selected their own successors, orchestrated votes, and murdered rivals in shadows. SPQR adorned standards, mosaics, even coins. Its omnipresence made it truth. A lesser-known moment highlights the depth of this illusion. In 63 BCE, when Cicero uncovered the Catiline conspiracy, he invoked SPQR not just as a rallying cry, but as divine justification to execute Roman citizens without trial. The letters themselves seemed to carry moral authority, even when law and ethics collapsed. But Rome's symbols weren't static. As the city grew fat on taxes and tribute, its elite learned a new trick: export ideology. Colonies received SPQR-branded governance. Local elites were co-opted. Roman baths, temples, and theaters bore the mark like luxury tags. Resistance became not just disobedience, but heresy against the Republic's divine image. In the eastern provinces, however, something odd occurred. Locals began reinterpreting SPQR. In Asia Minor, archaeologists discovered coins with SPQR miswritten, hinting that even as Rome pushed the brand, its meaning dissolved at the edges. The empire had exported its letters, but not its language. This tension between meaning and power, symbol and substance, would never fully resolve. And yet, SPQR endured. Not because it was universally understood, but because it was universally seen. It didn't need explanation. It became a sigil, a shape, an enchantment burned into the psyche. One carved not just into stone, but soon into skin. The first records of SPQR etched into flesh are not found in law, but in legend. According to a peculiar military account discovered near Vindolanda, one of Rome's most remote northern outposts, an auxiliary soldier was buried with a small metal plate upon which the letters SPQR were scratched beside a rudimentary depiction of a forearm. Scholars Scholars believe it was a death tag, a crude attempt to honor what he once wore, not on his armor, on his body. Historians still debate whether Roman soldiers were officially required to tattoo themselves. Some point to Vigesius, a 4th century Roman writer who mentioned the practice of signaculum, a military brand, on a recruit's hand. The sign was a mark of ownership, not unlike livestock. But branding wasn't just about control. For many soldiers, especially legionnaires stationed far from Rome, SPQR wasn't merely an obligation. It became a source of belonging, an oath turned into ink. And then, as always, the empire adapted. By the time of the Flavian dynasty, legions marching across Gaul and Germania bore standards so saturated with symbols that the boundary between state and religion blurred. The eagle, the laurel, and SPQR formed a trinity of imperial devotion. Skin followed suit. Tattoos, once taboo among elite Roman citizens, grew popular in the ranks of soldiers. The ink was usually crude, poked by bone needles, stained with charcoal, and rubbed with vinegar to scar deep. One strange account from the Dura Europos fortress on the Euphrates describes soldiers tattooing each other during Saturnalia, the midwinter festival of reversal. Drunk, howling, half-mad from boredom and homesickness, men carved SPQR into biceps and backs, not just for duty, but to remember who they once were or who Rome had told them they were. This was more than camaraderie, it was programming. And here lies the paradox. The very men sent to conquer the outer world were slowly being conquered by an inner mythology. They were Rome in flesh. They carried the emblem not because they were free, but because they weren't. A quiet erosion began. As more soldiers were drawn from the provinces Spain, Thrace, Africa, their relationship to Rome's heartland grew abstract. SPQR became less about Senate and people and more about the uniform, a talisman against foreignness, against forgetting. The ink replaced the city. One finds evidence of this transformation in Hadrian's Wall. Graffiti etched by soldiers at Housestead's fort bears SPQR alongside Celtic symbols, swirls, beasts, and tree-like spirals. These were not contradictions, they were integrations. Rome didn't erase identity, it absorbed it. And nowhere is that clearer than in the frontier zones that, throughout the entire history of the Roman Empire, served as cultural battlegrounds where SPQR collided with Celtic spirals, Germanic runes, and desert prayers. But identity is a slippery thing. In time, tattoos bled into superstition. A peculiar story emerges from the writings of Cassius Dio. A unit in Pannonia believed that SPQR tattoos held magical protection. Before battle, they would rub ash over the letters, muttering invocations not to Jupiter, but to the eagle standard itself. The ink had become divine. It was no longer just about Rome, it was about survival. The strange irony, while SPQR was etched into muscle, the republic it referred to was long dead. Legions now served emperors who executed senators at will. Elections were theater. The Senate and people had become a brand worn by those furthest from its reach. And yet, the farther the empire expanded, the more SPQR was inscribed not just on buildings or shields, but on the very bodies that bled for it. Roman generals noticed. Some even encouraged it. Tacitus records that during the Batavian Revolt, some generals ordered their men to tattoo SPQR before battle to stiffen resolve, as if flesh-bound loyalty could suppress rebellion. It didn't work. The Batavians revolted anyway, but the ink remained. It became something that outlived the orders, outlived the emperors, outlived even Rome. And when the Western Empire finally fell, crumbling under its own contradictions, the last Roman soldiers didn't abandon SPQR. They brought it with them, on skin, on memory, on myth. Because even when empires die, symbols don't. By the 5th century, the Roman Empire was fragmented beyond recognition. Goths had sacked the capital. Vandals had seized Carthage. The West was no longer ruled, it was bleeding out. And yet, in a dusty outpost in modern-day Sudan, rumors surfaced of a skeleton unearthed with unusual markings. Some amateur archaeologists claim the arm bone bore faint scarring 4 lines, suspiciously similar to the Latin letters SPQR. The evidence remains unverified, but the tale continues to circulate, another strange echo of Rome far beyond its recorded frontiers. SPQR. No records mention a Roman outpost that far south. No known legion had officially stationed there. And yet, the ink burned into bone endured. This discovery, still under scholarly review, is emblematic of a strange truth. SPQR traveled further than Rome did. By late antiquity, the tattoo had outgrown the city. It moved with exiles, mercenaries, deserters. It crossed rivers and deserts, etched not by senators or scribes, but by survivors. Historians still debate whether these late-period SPQR markings were proud emblems or desperate echoes. One theory suggests they became protective charms used by former legionaries to barter for safety in foreign lands, like a passport made of pain. Stranger still are the ritualistic elements found along the Danube. In a collapsed Roman site near Singidunum, modern Belgrade archaeologists uncovered ritual basins and burnt remnants of organic materials. Among the ruins were crude carvings and military graffiti, including fragments of Latin inscriptions. Some scholars speculate that elite Roman units may have engaged in ritualistic branding, blending sacred oaths with bodily sacrifice. They call this speculative practice corporis fidelitas, loyalty of the body, though no official documentation has confirmed its widespread use. Some scholars refer to this speculative practice as corporis fidelitas, loyalty of the body. It's believed that legionnaires undergoing initiation into elite units may have branded SPQR into their arms while reciting lines from Virgil and Livy, fusing patriotism with pain. This was no longer just identification. It was devotion, a form of embodied scripture. And as Rome's structure collapsed, these rituals only intensified. The less Rome was, the more desperately men clung to what it meant. In the eastern half of the empire, things evolved differently. Byzantine soldiers, though legally successors to Rome, never adopted the SPQR branding. They saw it as archaic, an emblem of a West now buried beneath rubble and rot. Instead, they bore crosses, saints, or the Chi-Rho. Their loyalty had shifted from Senate and people to Christ and Emperor. This divergence revealed something subtle but critical. SPQR wasn't a universal Roman idea, it was a Western one, a fading echo of a republic long vanished. And yet, even as the Eastern Empire endured another 1,000 years, SPQR tattoos continued to reappear in Northern Europe, among Gothic converts trained in Roman fashion, and even later, in the scrolls of Carolingian monks, who copied Latin prayers with marginal drawings of soldiers bearing the 4 letters on their necks. How did the symbol survive? Because ink moves with memory. It skips generations, not borders. It leaps from warband to monastery, from bone to parchment. By the time the Crusades erupted, the legacy of Rome lingered in whispers and motifs. Some medieval chroniclers describe symbols among the knightly ranks that resembled Roman letters SPQR among them. Whether these were actual tattoos, ceremonial insignia, or the imagination of later scribes remains the subject of scholarly debate. Modern scholars still argue about its significance. Was it nostalgia, a mistaken homage, or something deeper, a desire to bind the Holy War to the legacy of Rome, as if to say, this is not new, this is inherited? Because that's what SPQR had become. Not just a symbol of a city, but a ghost that refused to die. Even as its meaning faded, it continued to be carved into ruins, into songs, and yes, still into skin. Centuries passed, empires rose, collapsed, and were buried beneath new flags and fresher lies. The Renaissance unearthed marble, not just physically, but ideologically. Rome was no longer a warning, it became a blueprint. Artists painted Caesars as greats, Scholars praise Cicero like scripture. And in the minds of kings and generals, one thought took root. If Rome ruled the world once, why not again? Fast forward to the 20th century, Mussolini stood on a balcony in Rome, gesturing like an emperor reincarnated. He wasn't just invoking power, he was invoking memory. Fascism didn't merely wear black, it wore Latin. Buildings rose with eagles and arches. Coins were minted bearing SPQR. Soldiers in Mussolini's black shirts were instructed to embrace their Roman heritage. In some elite units, men were tattooed not only with fascist insignia, but incredibly with SPQR on the inner arm, as if the ghosts of the legions had been summoned to march again. It was not just symbolism, it was resurrection. Historians still debate the scope of Mussolini's use of SPQR in his propaganda machine. Some say it was superficial, others argue it was central, a deliberate psychological link between the fascist state and the imagined glory of imperial Rome. After all, the term Deus mirrored dux, the ancient word for general. But the story doesn't end with fascism. In the post-war world, as Europe reckoned with its shattered ideologies, a strange phenomenon occurred. SPQR survived, not in politics, in tattoos. American GIs stationed in Italy during World War II often visited Roman ruins during downtime. Some were drawn to the power of the past. A few came home with the letters SPQR inked on their skin. At first, it was a novelty, a souvenir. But slowly it evolved. During the Vietnam War, reports emerged of U.S. Marines sporting Roman numerals, laurel wreaths, and even SPQR on their shoulders. To some, it was an ironic nod to empire. To others, it was deadly serious, a symbol of strength, discipline, and loyalty to a brotherhood forged in fire. By the time of the Iraq War, SPQR tattoos had begun to surface more frequently, though still sporadically among British paratroopers, French foreign legionnaires, and American servicemen. While not widespread, the symbolism revealed a recurring psychological theme. The soldier as heir to an ancient order, a warrior cloaked in myth, a myth of conquest, of order forged on the edge of chaos. One strange case stands out. A former U.S. Marine, now a security contractor, was photographed during the Battle of Fallujah. Across his chest, a massive SPQR tattoo, flanked by twin eagles. When asked by a reporter what it meant, he simply said, "It means we're still Rome." That quote ignited a firestorm. Journalists wrote op-eds questioning the ethics of empire nostalgia in modern warfare. Academics debated whether such symbols glorified oppression. Was SPQR a harmless historical nod, or a quiet admission that the West still saw itself as conqueror? Scholarly forums erupted. Some argued that the modern SPQR tattoo was stripped of its original context, just another macho symbol, like skulls or swords. Others claimed it betrayed an unconscious alignment with imperial violence. One scholar coined the phrase tattooed colonialism, a critique of how ancient symbols are used to mask modern dominance. And yet, the tattoos kept appearing. From NATO bases in Eastern Europe to clandestine operations in Central Africa, modern warriors continued to mark themselves not with the names of presidents or generals, but with four ancient letters, SPQR. It became an identity, a mythology, a ritual. Like the legionnaires before them, modern soldiers disillusioned, displaced, and drowning in uncertainty found meaning in an empire long gone. Because sometimes when institutions fail, symbols remain. And when the mission feels hollow, the ink fills the void. The question lingers like incense in a ruined temple. Why does SPQR still endure? Why 2,000 years after its rise as a state slogan, long after the last Roman senator fell silent, and the eagle standards were captured and forgotten, do modern men still burn those letters into their skin? It's not nostalgia, not really. Most of those who wear it couldn't translate Senatus Populusque Romanus without a quick Google search. It's something deeper. SPQR has become an archetype. In Jungian psychology, an archetype is a primordial symbol older than language, hardwired into human consciousness. SPQR, over centuries, has been chiseled into the cultural memory, not as an acronym, but as an idea. Order, discipline, glory, brotherhood, power cloaked in purpose. Modern soldiers, like the legionnaires before them, aren't just waging war, they're waging identity. When you step into chaos, foreign land, foreign language, foreign cause, who are you? What do you cling to? A flag, a slogan, or a symbol no one can quite explain, but everyone somehow understands? SPQR offers something most modern institutions can't, a sense of ancient belonging. When systems become unstable, when nations seem transient, when missions lose clarity, SPQR remains. Not as fact, but as faith. One might think of the Roman Empire as something buried, but in military subcultures around the world, it isn't buried at all. It's reinterpreted, repurposed, revived. In recent years, some foreign fighter forms and photos from unofficial paramilitary groups have circulated showing patches marked with SPQR and the Roman eagle. Though not confirmed as official insignia, these symbols seem to reflect a grassroots fascination with Roman discipline and imagined imperial identity. The same year, a young soldier from Texas posted a photo online, a fresh SPQR tattoo on his forearm. In the caption, he wrote, "For those who came before us, for the line we carry. Was it hubris? Was it heritage? Or was it just one more echo in an unbroken chorus?" Historians still debate whether symbols like SPQR represent dangerous romanticism or necessary myth. Some warn that to wear the empire is to inherit its sins, its conquests, its arrogance, its blood-soaked myths. Others argue that humans need symbols to survive suffering, that we reach for ancient ideas not to conquer, but to make sense of pain. And pain, after all, is where tattoos begin. That sting, that permanence, that irrational hope that the mark might outlast the moment. But perhaps the strangest thing about SPQR is not how long it's lasted, but how rarely it's questioned. Like a spell passed down across generations, the ink whispers without asking permission. It says, you belong to something older. It says, this matters even if nothing else does. It says, you're not the first to walk into the dark. So why do modern soldiers still wear it? Because what they're really looking for is a Rome that never truly existed, yet somehow still marches beside them. In memory, in myth, in the skin between shoulder and sword. Symbols don't die, they slumber. They wait in the cracks of ruined empires, in half-remembered prayers, in the humming quiet of an armory at dusk. SPQR is no longer a sentence. It's a presence, soft but unyielding. It lingers in the space between identity and aspiration, between history and hope. When a soldier tattoos SPQR onto their flesh today, they are not claiming citizenship in ancient Rome. They are reaching backward into legend, into legacy, into longing. The letters no longer belong to emperors or senators or the marble steps of a forgotten forum. They belong to the bruised, the marching, the uncertain, to those who need something unshakable when everything else feels like sand. And so SPQR lives. Not just in textbooks, nor just in timelines detailing the entire history of the Roman Empire, but in 1,000 silent rituals, in the hand gripping a rifle, in the comrade buried in foreign soil, in the night before battle when no orders can explain the weight in your chest. It lives because it feels real even if it never was. And in the end, maybe that's the secret. Rome may have fallen, but its shadow still walks, not on stone roads, but on skin. And sometimes that's enough, to endure, to remember, to march.